So, they listened. They actually did it. Bendy and the Dark Revival is not only not bad, but it's actually really good. I am both absolutely shocked and happy. Everything was going against this game. The development was a mess, the game was pushed back years from its original release, and the studio had a reputation of not caring about their game's quality, but they did it. I don't know what changed behind the scenes, but this game has genuine love and passion poured into it. The amount of unique animations, artwork, models, and general spectacle of this game is ridiculously good. It's like they took every single problem I had with the original game and improved on all of its faults. Granted, that doesn't mean the game is perfect. The combat, while leagues better than Bendy and the Ink Machine, still does leave a bit to be desired, and the enemy AI has just as much object permanence as before. But that's really the only major issues I have with the game, which is saying a lot when I made an hour-and-a-half long video about all the problems with the original game. So yeah, I'm just gonna talk about what makes this game good, and throw in a few comparisons between this and Bendy and the Ink Machine along the way. Oh, also, spoiler warning. This isn't going to be nearly as in-depth as the other video I made, but I am considering a video in a similar vein for Dark Revival. Don't expect that for a while, though. I need a break from Bendy after all that. So, let's start off with the atmosphere, since that was my major talking point in the other video. The atmosphere in Dark Revival recaptures everything that the original Chapter 1 had, and more. And I mean much more. The environments all feel claustrophobic or generally creepy. The amount of cramped passageways adds so much, and it's exactly the direction I wanted the original game to go in. Even in larger areas, your view is often obscured by things hanging from the ceiling, which makes the room feel more cramped, despite its size. I mean, just comparing the Heavenly Toys room from this and the original Chapter 3 shows a huge improvement on this front. Also, there's so many examples of things being obscured in shadow and being barely seen, which is not a bad thing. It adds to the feeling of not knowing the full picture of what's going on. I really like it when horror games obscure things in shadow. It's kind of like the Jaws effect. The less you see, the scarier it is. You don't have a full understanding of things baked in shadow, which is great for a game like this. The locations are packed with detail as well. There's so much detail and actual effort into making the environments feel filled. Again, just comparing some of the rooms that make a return in this game from the original is amazing. It has so much more depth and atmosphere. Generally, the art styles improved tenfold as well. They leaned fully into the direction they were trying to take the original game's art style in, and it paid off. Everything is darker, the lighting in general is fantastic, and the thick dark lines and the textures tie everything together. While Bendy and the Ink Machine felt like a game that was trying to pull in two different directions with both its gameplay and art style, Dark Revival feels like a complete vision from start to finish. Hell, I don't even think the game needed to be separated into chapters. It feels like one cohesive story, which should be a given in games, but with this studio, it's definitely a win. Speaking of which, the story, another thing that I think Bendy and the Ink Machine fumbled horribly, is now actually pretty good. The way they drop hints as to what's going on and the build up to the reveal of that is so satisfying. It actually explained the plot of the game, and it's actually good. It made Bendy and the Ink Machine's story actually work well, and no, that doesn't excuse Bendy and the Ink Machine. It still did a horrible job with its story. But Dark Revival managed to make it work in the context of this game. The way they made the story made me constantly want to think of where the game could go and what direction they were taking it in. The cycles, while horrible in the first game, managed to actually make the story incredibly interesting, and I genuinely wanted to figure out how this cycle got to be this way. It made me ask questions myself, and then those questions were paid off. It built up things without being too obvious on what it was building to. Now, not all the story is great. I think they could have done a bit more with Alice, although god, that model is fantastic. Also, the worst cutscene in Bendy and the Ink Machine was improved tenfold here. This is how you do a death scene. But I think she could have been around for a bit longer. Sammy was also just done so dirty. But at the same time, I'm glad that they didn't rely on old characters. They don't pretend they don't exist, but they craft new characters or reshape old ones to have a fresh look and character. I think Allison has definitely improved here, but I think she could have had more of a presence. I was hoping for a bit more with her and Tom, but it didn't bother me as much as the first game since she was introduced near the beginning. And they did keep getting brought up throughout the entire chapter, so she never felt fully gone. But I think the greatest character redemption in this game compared to the first one is the Ink Demon. Holy hell, he is everything I wanted him to be. His design is terrifying, his voice is so good, and yeah, he has a voice. I would have thought I would hate that, but I actually kind of love it. His mechanic is very similar to the one in the first game, but quicker and definitely more dangerous. Holy hell, scrambling to a spot to hide is so tense when you don't know where a hiding spot is. And he's actually a constant threat throughout the game. It feels like he's actually hunting you down. I think he could have had some more appearances outside of the hunts, but the ones he did have were so good. And Beast Bendy, holy hell, they made the design actually work. He looks like an actual beast. He didn't skip leg day this time. I am so happy that they made Bendy an actual threat to the player, and on top of that, he also has a small form. God, he is cute. Look at him sitting on this bench. How could you not love that? The reveal, while a bit predictable, is also just cool. I fucking adore Bendy as a character in this game, and he's an actual antagonist now. I am so glad they did him justice. I also really like the new characters introduced. The Keepers are actually really good villains. Their design is great. Love the wires coming from beneath them. I also love their voices. Honestly, all the voices in this game are great. Props to the huge team of voice actors for this. Every tape sounds fantastic, and the cutscenes are great. While the voices in the original Bendy were good, it's still a step up across the board here. Audrey's voice is really good, along with her character in general. A much more interesting protagonist than Henry was. I love the power-up she gets, and she feels a bit more human than Henry did, which is kind of ironic. Then there's Wilson, and he's a damn good antagonist. I appreciate the almost fake out at the end, only to reveal that yes, he is as evil as he looks. He also has really creepy undertones throughout the game. Makes me uncomfortable, but in a good way. I think he works pretty damn well, although Bendy is definitely the star of the show here. I also really dig his monster design, such a sick looking character. The fight is also done really well in general, a much better final boss than Beast Bendy. Speaking of the final section, running down the halls with Beast Bendy trying to get to the projector, really cool. I think it's a bit corny, but honestly, I was just having fun with it. I think the ending is pretty good, much better than Bendy and the Ink Machine. I think it's still kind of unsatisfying, but I feel like that's likely on purpose. This game definitely feels like the second game in a trilogy. I wouldn't be surprised if the next game is about destroying the cycle forever. Speaking of, this game does a great job at not only explaining the cycle, but also getting me to actually care about it. I understood how it worked in the original Bendy, but it was never really touched on much in the game, outside of the Looking Glass and earlier chapters, so it never got me to really care about it. I think it could have maybe worked in Bendy and the Ink Machine if it was, you know, good. I think Bendy and the Ink Machine would work really well as the game leading up to this one if it was actually done well. Bendy and the Ink Machine sets up the cycle, Bendy and the Dark Revival explores that cycle, and the third game presumably destroys the cycle. Unfortunately, Bendy and the Ink Machine kind of sucks. And yeah, just because this game is good doesn't mean you have to rush to the comments and say, Bendy is actually good now, you idiot, I'm right and you're wrong. Because while I do like Dark Revival, I still hold the exact same opinion on Bendy and the Ink Machine. It still sucks, but hey, the Bendy franchise doesn't completely suck now, and that's a good thing. Anyways, enough about the bad game, back to the good one. So yeah, the story's actually good. I really enjoyed my time with it. I hope they can keep it up and deliver a satisfying ending. But let's move on from that and discuss the gameplay. While it isn't as much of a step up as the story is, it still leagues better than the last game. It actually kind of has the opposite problem. Instead of being painfully slow and dull, it almost feels too fast and chaotic. The enemies are super fast now, and the combat reflects that. It's definitely preferred over Bendy and the Ink Machine, but I feel like it could have used a bit more time to iron out the kinks in it. I feel like making the enemies be able to be knocked back by hits, or somehow making the teleport power work with the combat, would make it flow a lot better. Also, I'm glad they don't have object permanence. Holy hell, that would be annoying if they did. But I feel like there should be at least an animation or something of them looking around, being confused for a second before they walk off, instead of just immediately losing interest. Speaking of hiding, stealth is now more of a core element in the game, and I don't hate it. It's not great. It's really annoying how they lock onto you if you open the door too close to them. Like, that makes sense, but sometimes they're pretty far away and they still hear me, and it just gets annoying. Also, they're blind as hell, which is a good thing. The jank with their AI is kind of a blessing. It actually makes it more fun in a weird way. But what's the point of stealth? Well, it allows you to take down enemies with your power. It's incredibly satisfying to pull it off, if I'm being honest. I love just sneaking up behind a line of them and picking them off one by one. Again, the stealth isn't great, but despite that, I still want to use it because I actually enjoy the mechanic so much. So yeah, kind of a step up from Walking Simulator over here. Speaking of walking, holy shit, you actually have a decent run speed. Also stamina, which is interesting. It definitely does help keep the tension up when you're running away from something and your stamina runs out. But it's not really annoying. If you're smart, a full bar of stamina should be able to get you to a safe place. So when it runs out, it's kind of your fault. And I like that. The stamina bar doesn't just feel like a nerf to running, but a part of the mechanic, which is a hard thing to balance in a game. I do think the game is actually well balanced generally. I think there was only one section where I wasn't having fun with the enemies, and it's this section. God, they just keep spawning. The difficulty in general feels pretty balanced. When you die, you don't actually die most of the time. You just respawn with no progress lost. So if you were swarmed by a group of enemies, die, then go back to that group, the ones that you already killed will still be dead. It does kind of remove a bit of tension, but honestly the convenience it applies is really nice. You only actually die from a small handful of things. The ink demon, this weird teeth thing, and the final boss, and probably some others I can't remember off the top of my head. It also makes those characters feel more powerful, like holy shit, they actually killed you. It's a small but neat thing. I did make the mistake of playing on hard mode on my first playthrough. I was originally going to talk about how it's sometimes hard to tell where you're supposed to go, but apparently on hard mode it gets rid of those indicators. Here I was thinking, well, I've beaten Bendy Link Machine about 7 times in the past month, so what could go wrong with picking hard? Everything. Past Alan. Everything could go wrong. The difficulty setting is actually really nice, and while the indicators being got on hard mode was annoying, the combat was super tense. Enemies kill you extremely quickly on hard, so every fight felt like I had a real possibility of dying. And die I did. I died a lot on my first playthrough, but that's a good thing in my eyes. The hard mode is actually hard. That's a good thing, but don't make the same mistake I did and play hard on your first playthrough. It's not worth it. Well, the gameplay is solid, the characters are good, but this is a horror game, right? So is it scary? Absolutely. I wouldn't say like shitting my pants scary or anything, but yeah, this game made me scream a few times. The horror in this game is super well done. It has this creepy, non-in-your-face stuff, and it has this fucker who will literally spawn randomly at any point throughout the game. I know this could easily be considered cheap, it's a textbook jump scare, but oh my god, it works so well. You never know when she's gonna appear, and yeah, it got me a lot. Either you're constantly paranoid about when she'll spawn, or you forget about her and then she jump scares you. It works surprisingly well for how simple it is. But the non-in-your-face stuff is also really good. Getting glimpses of creatures and just the sound design in general adds so much, and it builds this fantastic atmosphere that always keeps you on your toes. It is a ridiculous step up from the first game in terms of its horror in both jump scares and its subtle horror. And this game doesn't pull its punches like Bendy and the Ink Machine. It leaned into the horror. There's dead bodies hanging from ceilings, legs being ripped off, people being ripped to literal shreds, the Ink Demon eating living beings, among other things. The tone in this game is significantly darker than Bendy, which is exactly what I wanted. But yeah, the general tone of the game is so much better than the original Bendy, and I'm so happy that they leaned back in the horror direction. Of course, it can always be pushed further, but this is a damn good start. Another thing I actually surprisingly enjoyed in this game was the fan service. You'd think reminding me of one of my least favorite games of all time would be a bad thing, but no. Everything was tastefully done apart from Sammy, and it felt integrated well into the story. Henry getting a face reveal and showing up at all was nice to see. Never thought I'd be happy to see Henry, but here we are. The very beginning of the game, when you have to collect the objects for the Ink Machine, like Chapter 1, was actually a really nice callback, and not nearly as annoying as the original fetch quest. And holy hell, when I realized that this was the room from Chapter 3 leading up to Heavenly Toys, I genuinely got giddy. Also, the moment when you're sent to the start of Chapter 1 was also just so good, and it looks so much better now. Like I said at the end of my last video, I still can't help but hold some sort of fondness for Bendy and the Ink Machine. So to see these old locations done well, done justice in a good game, was just really nice, you know? I really did mean it when I said that I'd love to be a Bendy fan again, and this game has made me one. Going into this game, I fully expected nothing more than a cheap sequel, but it surprised me, and I'm glad. So, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I look forward to the future of Bendy. Thanks Dark Revival for making me a fan of Bendy again.